The desert sun blazed overhead, turning the rocky landscape into a furnace of light and heat. Shadows were short and harsh, and the air shimmered with waves of heat rising from the sand and stone. A lone figure moved through the terrain with careful steps, her eyes sharp, her senses alert. She was an Apache woman, proud and strong, carrying the weight of her people's traditions and survival skills in every motion. The desert had always been her home, a place of both beauty and danger. But today it had something different to offer, something she could not face alone. She had been walking along a narrow path between two jagged rock formations when the sudden sharp pain shot through her leg. She stumbled, barely catching herself on a jagged stone. A low hiss echoed through the small canyon, and she knew immediately what it was. A snake had bitten her, its fangs buried deep beneath the folds of her skirt, striking at the tender flesh of her leg. Panic surged through her for only a moment, replaced quickly by the training and instinct that had kept her alive in the desert for years. She tried to stand, but the venom spread faster than she expected. Her leg swelled, heat and pain radiating upward with each pulse of her heartbeat. She gritted her teeth and crouched against the rock, trying to keep her body calm. The desert offered no immediate help. The nearest town was miles away, and the creatures of the desert did not wait for anyone to recover. She knew that survival depended on quick thinking and even quicker action. Far off, a figure appeared atop a small ridge, tending to a herd of cattle grazing near a dry wash. The rancher was a solitary man, known to some in the nearby town, but mostly living on the outskirts of the desert, where he could manage his cattle and work the land in peace. He noticed movement out of the corner of his eye, a sudden stumble near the rocks. His gaze sharpened. It was unusual to see anyone wandering so far from the paths, especially alone. Without hesitation, he left the cattle under the care of his dog and began moving toward the figure, his boots crunching against the hard sand. By the time he reached her, she was sitting on the ground, leaning against the rocks, her face pale but determined. He froze for a moment, recognizing the seriousness of her situation. The bite was low on her leg, partially hidden beneath her clothing, but the swelling and discoloration told him everything he needed to know. Venom had entered her system. And without immediate help, her chances were slim. "I can help you," he said calmly, approaching carefully. "I've got medicine, and I know how to slow it down." Her eyes flicked toward him, wary and suspicious. The Apache people were cautious around strangers, especially men who came from outside their communities. His hands were empty, but his presence alone was both threatening and reassuring. She weighed her options, but the pain was spreading, and she realized she had little choice. "All right," she said finally, her voice firm despite the tremor in her leg. "But do not try anything foolish." The rancher nodded, keeping his movements deliberate and slow. He knelt beside her, examining the wound without touching her too roughly. He retrieved a clean cloth from his pack and began creating a makeshift tourniquet to slow the spread of venom. She winced, but said nothing, allowing him to work. He poured a small amount of water over the wound, careful not to worsen the sting, and began applying herbs he had learned about from his grandmother, plants native to the desert with properties that could counteract poison and reduce swelling. "Name?" he asked gently, not wanting to alarm her. "Naiche," she replied, the name carrying pride and weight, a name from her people's long history. "I'm Callum," he said. "We'll get you somewhere safe." Moving her was difficult. Every step she took sent shockwaves of pain up her leg, but she allowed him to support her. The rancher adjusted her position, careful not to strain her leg further. They moved slowly, stepping over rocks and loose sand, using the natural folds and shadows of the terrain to navigate. The sun continued to beat down, unrelenting, but neither spoke much. The silence carried a weight of trust, forming slowly, forged not in words but in action and intent. Hours passed as they moved toward his ranch. The journey was difficult, testing both of them. She faltered more than once, and each time he supported her, never rushing, never showing frustration. At one point, she stumbled over a rock and nearly fell, and he caught her just in time. Her eyes met his, and she saw no judgment, only concern. That moment, small and fleeting, shifted something in her. Survival instincts still screamed caution, but a quiet understanding began to grow. By late afternoon, the ranch came into view. It was modest, made of weathered wood and stone, blending into the desert landscape. The rancher led her inside, setting her gently on a cot in a small, shaded room. He moved with efficiency, preparing a clean space and applying further care to the bite. She watched him, her pride warring with her need for help. He cleaned the wound, bandaged it carefully, and applied more herbal remedies, explaining each step as he went. "You've been bitten before?" she asked quietly, wincing as he tightened a bandage. "More than once," he replied with a small shrug. "Out here, you learn quick, but the important part is staying calm and letting it heal." Her gaze softened slightly, and she realized that he was more than capable. She had expected him to be rough, uncaring, or worse, but his movements were careful, his tone measured. There was no rush, no impatience. He understood the desert's dangers and respected her space while ensuring her safety. As evening approached, the desert sky turned shades of orange and purple, the harsh sun giving way to a cooler twilight. The rancher brought her water and some simple food, helping her eat despite her pain. She noticed how he attended to his own tasks while keeping an eye on her, a quiet vigilance that spoke volumes. "You should rest," he said finally, after she had eaten. "The venom is slowing, but your body needs to recover. I'll be right here if you need anything." She lay back on the cot, exhaustion and relief washing over her. For the first time since the bite, she allowed herself to let her guard down just a little. She studied the rancher as he moved about, tidying the room and preparing supplies. There was a steadiness in him, a humanity that she had rarely trusted in strangers. The night deepened. Outside, the desert was alive with sound, the whisper of wind over rocks, the distant calls of nocturnal animals. Inside, the quiet of the ranch contrasted sharply with the chaos of the day. Nietzsche could feel her strength slowly returning, though the memory of the bite and the pain it caused lingered. She realized that without this man, she might not have survived. A grudging respect formed, tempered by her pride, but undeniable. Callum sat near the door, keeping watch. He glanced at her occasionally, checking her breathing, ensuring that the wound did not worsen. In the quiet, he thought about the strange twists of fate that brought them together. The lone woman in the desert, the venom, and the sudden responsibility of saving a life that was not his own by blood, but deeply connected by circumstance. Hours passed, and Nietzsche drifted into a restless sleep, her dreams filled with shadows of the desert, the snake, and the hands that had helped her. She dreamed of running through the desert unhindered, moving freely without pain, yet always under the watchful eye of the rancher who had proven himself to be more than a stranger. By the time dawn broke, casting soft light across the desert floor, Nietzsche stirred, her strength returning slowly. She looked at Callum, who was already awake, tending to the morning chores. There was a silent acknowledgement between them. No words necessary, only understanding. The first part of her ordeal had ended. She had survived the snake's bite, faced the harshness of the desert, and discovered an unexpected ally in the rancher. But the story was far from over. There were challenges ahead, both from the land and the people who would question her alliance with an outsider. Yet in that moment, as the desert awoke around them, Nietzsche realized one truth. Help could come from unexpected places, and sometimes humanity's strength was found in courage, compassion, and the willingness to act when no one else would. The sun rose higher, promising a new day, and with it, the beginning of trust, understanding, and a bond forged in the crucible of survival. For Nietzsche and Callum, the desert was no longer just a place of danger. It had become a place where courage, kindness, and human strength could shine through even the harshest trials. The desert morning was calm, with a light breeze stirring the dry sagebrush and carrying the scent of the distant mountains. Nietzsche had slept through much of the night, her body slowly healing, and the rancher, Callum, had kept a quiet vigil beside her. As she opened her eyes, she felt the stiffness in her leg, but the worst of the venom's effect had passed. The swelling had gone down, and she could move more freely than the previous day. Callum noticed her stirring and smiled gently. "Morning. How's the leg?" he asked, keeping his tone light but concerned. Nietzsche tested it carefully. "Better, thanks to you," she admitted, though her pride prevented her from saying more. She sat up, brushing sand from her clothing. The desert outside was waking up, the first rays of sun casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. "You need to eat," Callum said. He prepared a simple breakfast, making sure she had enough strength to continue recovery. Nietzsche accepted, her movements cautious but steady. She watched him as he worked, impressed by the care he put into even small tasks. There was an ease to his presence, a steadiness that made the harsh desert feel safer. After breakfast, she suggested they move outside so she could stretch her legs. The rancher supported her, offering an arm as they stepped into the sun. The heat was softer in the morning, the sky a deep, endless blue. They walked slowly, each step a test, but Nietzsche began to regain confidence in her own strength. As the day wore on, she found herself talking more than she had intended. She shared stories of her people, their traditions, the way they moved through the land, the respect they had for every living creature. Callum listened quietly, asking questions at times, never interrupting. He seemed genuinely interested, and this honesty broke down some of the walls she had built around herself. "You have courage," Callum said finally, looking her in the eyes. "Not everyone could handle what you did yesterday. Most would panic." Nietzsche looked away, uncertain how to respond. She had been trained to survive, to face danger without fear, yet the venom had reminded her that even the strongest could need help. "Courage does not mean you do not need help," she said softly. "It means you know when to accept it." The rancher nodded. "Exactly. And you accepted it." They spent the afternoon checking the ranch, making sure the animals were safe and the fences secure. Though her leg still ached slightly, Nietzsche felt a growing sense of purpose. She was not just recovering, she was learning how someone from outside her world could act with integrity, respect, and humanity. Callum treated her as an equal, never underestimating her abilities, yet offering help when she needed it. Late in the afternoon, a dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Nietzsche squinted, realizing that someone was approaching. From the shape of the figures, she could tell it was townspeople, likely curious about why she had been with the rancher. She stiffened, unsure of their intentions. Some members of her community distrusted outsiders, and she had yet to fully explain why she had accepted his help. Callum noticed her tension and put a hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, I'll handle them. You just focus on yourself." When the townspeople arrived, their faces were a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "We saw her with you," one of them said to Callum, eyeing Nietzsche warily. "Why is she here?" Callum answered calmly. "She was bitten by a snake. I helped her, that's all. She is recovering now, and she needs rest, not questions." Nietzsche watched him, admiration mixing with relief. He did not just protect her physically, he protected her dignity too. The townspeople murmured but eventually left. perhaps realizing that there was no point arguing with someone who acted with such quiet authority. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of red and gold, Nietzsche and Callum sat outside the ranch house. The warmth of the sun was fading, replaced by the cooling evening air. She looked at him and finally allowed herself to speak more freely. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything." Callum smiled softly. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because anyone out here could need help someday. Because humanity is stronger when we act with courage and compassion. That's what matters." Her eyes lingered on him. His words were simple, yet they carried weight. She had seen many strangers in her life, some kind, some cruel. But rarely had she seen someone act with such honesty and strength, not for reward or recognition, but simply because it was right. Over the next few days, Nietzsche continued to recover fully. She moved more freely, helped with the daily chores of the ranch, and even tended to some of the animals. She began to see Callum not just as a helper, but as a partner in the tasks that kept life in the desert possible. Though they came from different worlds, they discovered shared values, resilience, respect, and a willingness to act when others would hesitate. One evening, as they watched the desert sky fill with stars, she spoke of her people's traditions, the way they read the land, listened to the wind, and understood the signs of nature. Callum listened intently, fascinated by the knowledge passed down through generations. He asked questions, learning from her expertise, and in turn shared small pieces of his own knowledge of the desert, survival techniques, and the subtle ways he cared for the land and animals. Through these conversations, a quiet bond formed. It was not love in the immediate sense, but a deep respect and understanding that went beyond words. Nietzsche realized that strength was not measured by how much danger one could face alone, but by the courage to trust, to accept help, and to act with integrity when it mattered most. Yet challenges remained. Some members of her community remained skeptical of her association with an outsider. She would have to navigate their questions and perhaps their disapproval. But she felt confident that Callum's presence and actions would speak louder than rumors. He had proven that humanity, at its best, was capable of courage, honor, and compassion. One afternoon, as they repaired a fence damaged by a recent windstorm, a small fire broke out near the dry brush. Callum immediately grabbed water and tools, and Nietzsche, despite her recent injury, helped him contain it. They worked together seamlessly, combining knowledge, strength, and determination. By the time the fire was under control, the sun was high, and they both stood exhausted but triumphant. The fire had threatened more than just the ranch. It could have spread to nearby desert habitats, but together, they had prevented disaster. Nietzsche looked at Callum with newfound admiration. "I see now," she said quietly, "that courage comes in many forms. It is not just facing a snake or a fire. It is knowing what to do and acting when it counts." Callum nodded. "Exactly, and sometimes it is helping others when no one else will." As the day ended and they sat together watching the sunset, the desert transformed once more. Shadows stretched long across the rocks and sand, and the sky was ablaze with color. Nietzsche realized that the world was larger than her own experiences, and that humanity had the capacity for strength and goodness that transcended fear, suspicion, or difference. When night fell, the desert was alive with sound. Crickets chirped, wind whispered through rocks, and distant animals moved through the darkness. Nietzsche lay in the small cabin, reflecting on the events of the past days. She had faced danger alone, survived venom and pain, and discovered an unexpected ally in Callum. She had learned that strength was not just about survival, but about the courage to trust and the integrity to act when others hesitated. By the time dawn arrived, She felt fully healed, her body and spirit restored. She knew she would return to her people, but the lessons she had learned and the bond she had formed with Callum would remain. She would carry with her the knowledge that humanity, at its best, could rise above fear, act with courage and protect those in need, even when no one else would. Callum watched her from the doorway, knowing that their time together had changed both of them. The desert was still harsh, still dangerous, but in that harshness they had discovered the best of human strength, compassion, courage, and respect. Nietzsche smiled at him, a silent acknowledgement of gratitude and understanding, and stepped forward, ready to face her people with renewed confidence. The sun rose over the desert, warm and bright, signaling not just another day but the promise of a future shaped by courage, respect, and the quiet strength of humanity. Together, they had faced the dangers of the desert and survived, and in doing so, they had discovered a truth as enduring as the land itself. The best of humanity shines brightest in moments of courage, compassion, and selfless action.